OK, we're going to return to politics now. We are joined by the Shadow Secretary of State for Justice, Steve Reid. A very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
Look, a lot of people will be reflecting on what's happening across the country with the strikes and what's a first, really, for schools in England and Wales in this current round of them is the teachers walking out. 7 million children at home. Do you think that teachers should be doing this?
Well, nobody wants to see strikes, do they? Nobody wants to see kids not able to go to school, and that includes the teachers themselves. So we have to ask ourselves, why is this happening today? The government knew there was a risk of strikes as far ago as last summer, but they never sat down to talk through with the teaching unions what these issues were. And in fact, it's hard to work out who would have actually been sitting down with the unions, because over the last year there have been 5 different Secretaries of State for Education, including Nadeem Zahawi, who we now know was more focused on taking legal action to silence journalists like you for asking legitimate questions about his tax affairs, rather than sitting down and sorting out these problems in the education system.
Okay.
So these strikes could have been avoided. You know, if Labour was in power, we would sit down straight away. We'd have done it straight from last summer to make it unnecessary to have strikes by coming to some kind of agreement with the unions.
Although the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party last night pointing out the numbers of union barons who are in the Executive Committee of the Labour Party very much funding you. So those discussions are probably very different from those of the current government. But on the point of Gillian Keegan, I do think, you know, credit where credit is due. First day in the job, she received a letter from the teaching unions asking for more money. And in the autumn statement, the government coughed up £2.3 billion. They say the next couple of years within schools, there will be record funding.
I mean, if you look at what the Tories did in their mini-budget last autumn, they crashed the economy. They stood up and they announced £60 billion of unfunded commitments that caused a run on the pound, forced up interest rates, forced up mortgages, and the item that you just had a moment ago, interest rates in this country higher than in other countries as a direct result of the mistakes made by the government. Now, that came after they'd been in power for over 12 years, and during that period, teachers' pay has been cut in real terms. Now we've got inflation at a near 40-year high, and teachers are being offered a pay rise less than half the rate of inflation, so it's another cut. Now, what Gillian Keegan should be doing is sitting down with the trade unions and negotiating a long-term settlement that gets us out of this problem. Fundamental to that would be a government that can actually grow the economy. We know that the Conservatives can't grow the economy. The figures out yesterday from the IMF telling us that our economy will actually grow slower, it will shrink, grow slower than the Russian economy, and that is the subject of major international sanctions. So we've got an incompetent government, unable to run the economy and unable to negotiate with the teaching unions.
Yeah. Steve, there you are. You are the Shadow Secretary for Justice. And a few weeks ago, we had a big story on the probation service and whether it was actually fit for purpose. And there's a shocking story which has emerged about serious offenders and the fact that one serious offender on probation, I just can't believe the statistic, is found guilty of murder in this country every single week. Now, it would be easy to kick the probation service, but it sounds to me as if it is a service in collapse, not fit for purpose, not necessarily their own fault. What's your take?
Well, Eamon, I agree with every word you've just said. It is just shocking that there is one murder on average every week committed by offenders who are out of prison on probation, so supposedly being supervised by the probation services. But in addition to that, there's an average of 2 serious sexual assaults every week as well. So we can see these services are collapsing. So what's gone wrong is, back in 2014, the government forced through a botched part privatisation of these services. Everyone told them don't do it. It was the disaster that was predicted. 4 years later, they did a rushed renationalisation, but they lost an awful lot of experienced probation officers. There are parts of the service that are still carrying 45% vacancies, and they haven't fixed the problem. The information about offenders' behaviour that led to them being convicted and sent to prison, their behaviour inside prison, is not routinely collected and passed on to the remaining probation officers who take decisions regulations, about the risk categorisation. And perhaps most shocking of all, there was a whistleblower speaking on the TV news last night, Eamon, who says that there is direct pressure on probation officers to reduce the risk category of offenders before they're released on probation. So high category prisoners are being sent out as medium or low risk, which means the supervision is reduced. Now, I'm afraid the government must take responsibility for these errors, because report after report after report has told them what is going wrong, and they have chosen to do nothing, and that is putting the public in danger.
So we've got a service here which is a shortage of staff, workloads that they just can't deal with here as well, morale at rock bottom, and their inability to properly supervise dangerous offenders, which leaves all of us, it leaves the public at risk here. It is a shocking, shocking situation. The government will say they've got no money to fund it.
Well, the money is there, actually, for once, because these are vacancies. That means they are funded. They just haven't recruited into them. So if I would be the Justice Secretary if Labour wins the next general election, Labour's the party of law and order. We want to protect the public. So what I would do, I would recruit to fill those vacancies. I would change the way that we collect data so that every probation officer would get full information about what was really going on with prisoners so they could categorise the risk appropriately. And I would end the practice that the Conservatives have tolerated, which is that risk ratings are reduced so that more probation cases can be dealt with more quickly. Public safety must come first, and that must happen before speed. The Tories have just got this absolutely wrong.
Look, we're almost out of time, but I've only got time for one last question, and I have to ask you, whilst we've got you, about the comments being made by Michel Barnier being reported in today's papers. Our viewers and listeners will be well familiar with him as being that tough negotiator during the Brexit negotiations. He's come out and called Sir Keir Starmer a wonderful European who would make a great Prime Minister. Is that the kind of compliment Sir Keir Starmer wants?
I think you should take credit wherever you can get it, to be honest. But there are some serious issues to work out with our European partners. We have to make Brexit work. It clearly isn't at the moment. We need to lower the trade barriers that are really damaging trade with our European partners now. We need to solve the Northern Ireland protocol. And really, we need to get a better security relationship with our European friends to keep our country safe. But, you know, I think Keir would be a great Prime Minister too. And I think the country needs change now. So much is going wrong.
Steve Reid, Shadow Justice Minister, thank you.
Thank you very much.